So as much as I asked you to decide if you wear this or that, it's also important to understand that the goal is not to be so typical of one dimension. Clearly, is to have the flexibility. And so what we want is, we want you to be able to reflect like introverts do, but not to be a victim of your own reflection, to also be open to the rest of the world and interact with the environment. We also want you to be practical, to understand a situation in detail, to look at the facts, the positive and the negative, but also to be creative and to be willing to look at options and to willing to look at possibilities. We want you to make logical decisions, but also to take into account how you communicate your decisions and what is the impact of your decisions on other people. We want you to be organized, but also flexible. So it's your ability to really bounce back from these different dimensions that will make you mature and really influential. So you should have at this point 4 letters. Yes? Do you have identified your profile with your 4 letters? Okay. Now, when we talk about how to run meetings, I will talk about this model. This is what we call the process of efficiency. In other words, in a meeting or in any kind of situation, even when you manage a project that you're in charge of, it's important to make sure that you take into account these dimensions, which are the typical dimensions of this tool. Examine the facts, explore options, make the rational decisions, communicate decisions, structure, organize, plan, be flexible. And I would like to attract your attention to the fact that many times you go to a meeting and people discuss something in great details and then they make rational decision and they structure and organize and go into action, but they forget the steps. So these are people who make very quick decisions, who implement decisions very quickly and often make mistakes because they did not explore sufficiently other alternatives. And when I was talking about my pharmaceutical company, that scenario was typical of that company, and we did a lot of work with the different teams to acknowledge that they were very reactive, they made very quick decisions, partly because the managers were all extroverts, but they did not explore sufficiently the options, they did not communicate their decisions properly, and they were not very flexible. In other words, they were very productive, but a little bit like the guy who was spinning around in the bicycle, they're not going anywhere, okay? Then there is another type of dysfunction, which is the dysfunction of people who do not focus on detail. They constantly focus on possibilities. They get along, they communicate very well, they take into account each other's emotions, they're very popular, they take a lot of time to build rapport and relationships. They're very flexible, but they don't produce anything. And these are the teams of people who say, we could do this, oh yes, we could do that, and it's wonderful, and we'll enjoy each other's company, but nothing productive can come out of that. So it's important, if you find yourself in a team like this, to be able to say, hold on, have we looked at the facts? Have we made rational decisions? How can we structure? How can you bring your strengths? How can you bring your type in a dynamic, in a group dynamic, to really make a contribution? Because if a group like this continues to recruit the same people and functions with their friends the same way, they're going to be very nice and very happy in the way they are, but they're not going to produce anything. And when we talk about managing meeting, I've even designed a form, very simple format, okay, the meeting date, the time, who's the facilitator. And when you discuss a topic, let's say we're going to talk about vacations, what's the objective? And you can just check, are we just going to examine the facts, or are we going to explore options, or are we going to make decisions, or the decision has been made and are we going to communicate the decision? By the way, how many times do you go to meetings where the decision has already been made? And yet, so we're already at the level 3 because the decisions have been made, but everybody's talking for hours about we could do this, we could do this, we could do that, even though the decision has been made. So these are the useless meetings. We often go to meetings that serve no purpose whatsoever, simply because people are not aligned. So if you go to a meeting and the decision has been made, it's important to say, well, before we spend all this time exploring all kinds of alternatives, let's make sure that the decision hasn't been made. Because it only makes sense to explore options if you have something to contribute to the decision. But if it has been made, you would go backwards and you would waste everybody's time. Now, so you have 16 options. So if you could find, I want to distribute this. It's also on the Dropbox with in your handouts. So find your own type. Are you an extrovert? Are you creative, analytical, and structured? So where is your type? What is your color? And then each color matches a type of intervention that is your strength. In other words, if you are a yellow person, you will be strong and exploring, promoting, you know, the notion of selling, of really being quite creative, and so you fall in the category of the explorers. If you are a pink person, you're much more an organizer. If you are a blue person, you are much more of a controller, and in other words, verifying if everything is correct, the court of auditors, the auditors. And if you are a green person, you're much more of an advisor. So it allows you to, again, identify your strengths. What am I good at? And of course, the question is there a synchronicity between what you're good at and what is required in your job? If I'm a very good explorer, promoter, I like to, to discover new ideas, I'm quite creative, and I'm being asked to be an inspector and a controller and an auditor, chances are I'm going to be very miserable. So hopefully we want to have some alignment between your strength and the job in which you are. And when you are part of a project, you need to be able to contribute your role and your qualities. Now clearly in a team we need the combination of all these different elements. And the more diverse the team is, the more effective it will be, because then we have the contribution of all the different people. So in any given project, we need somebody to develop the project, we need somebody to organize, we need somebody to produce the project, we need somebody to inspect, we need somebody to maintain order, we need somebody to advise, to innovate, to promote. So this is, again, the recipe of a good project and good project management. So when you enter a new position, a new function, or a new team, or a new project, or a new working group, you can say, okay, my strength is I'm a good promoter. Don't ask me to be an inspector, because this is not where I will contribute the most. So it gives you a vocabulary to actually explain who you are, what are your strengths, how you can contribute to a team. And of course then we go more on detail. What does it mean to advise? Okay, what does it mean to innovate? What does it mean to promote? What does it mean to develop? What does it mean to organize? What does it mean to, etc., etc. So you have all this in your handouts. I would go home, read those handouts, and help you look a little more in detail about who you are. Can you document who you are? Can you give visibility to who you are? Can you bring who you are to a situation, whether it's a one-to-one conversation, it's in a meeting, or when you do a presentation? And at the same time, can you be sensitive and sensible to the people that you talk to? And can you take into account the fact that people are not like you, they have different needs, they have different modes of operation, and they will not be able to understand what you're talking about if you don't meet them where they are. So instead of spending a lot of time spinning around, doing a lot of efforts that produce no results, it will allow you to be a little bit more effective and to say, okay, if that doesn't work with this person, maybe I need to change my style. Not to change who I am, but to change the way I approach this person. Because giving them more detail is not going to help. It's going to create more tension.
Maybe this provides us. I look at this in a not just exact way.
I don't belong just one category right here, but I think there are 3 categories which are suitable to me. These are innovating, promoting, and developing.
Yeah.
If I'm not in these one of these 3 categories, that means there is a problem.
Well, it
I'm
means
not
that it's going to
I'm
be
working
difficult.
in a job
Yeah.
which compatible with my skills and related to these 3 categories.
Yes.
That means there is a problem. There is a big problem.
Well, it means that it's going to be painful for you to be in that situation, because if you don't have the opportunity to bring your personality into your job, it's going to be difficult. It's not that you can't do it, but it's going to be the same thing as writing with the other hand. It's not that you can't do it, but it's going to take longer, it's going to be frustrating, it's going to be difficult, and eventually you're going to be bored, or you're going to be discouraged. So, of course, we need to be able to be in harmony with what we are in our job. Or you need to say, okay, I'm really going to learn to fit the format in which I'm being put. But then the question is, what is the price that you're paying for that? But clearly, again, if you look at the wheel, what we want is for you to start developing also the different aspects. I often use this wheel when I coach people, because then we can say, okay, if you are a good promoter, it's not enough to be a good promoter, you also need to be an organizer. And how can we start developing the different aspects of your personality? Because it may not be your strength, but sometimes it's required in your job.